an update on what's going on in Washington post Bryce.
I'm also a fan of the black and gold with a P on the cap. Because I went to San Pedro High School and we were the San Pedro Pirates. And so those are the real Pirates. What's happening in baseball in Washington, D.C. without Bryce Harper is that I am a Nationals fan. We have two incredible young Latin players, Juan Soto and Victor Robles, who are selling more jerseys than Bryce Harper was. So we're doing okay. The baseball team is doing just like they did last year, which is pretty miserable. But,
So Bob, you have a resume which I don't know anything about. So why don't you give us a little autobiography? In the beginning, you were born on a mountaintop someplace, but tell us about that.
well, you already got San Pedro, California, which is the harbor of Los Angeles. A wonderfully ethnically diverse place that taught me a lot. And I'm always will be grateful for what I learned in my public schools, and it was a part of the LA City school system, and it was back in the period when California was not just proud of its public schools, but lived off of its public schools and prospered off of its public schools.
Yes.
And then, because Southern California especially always lived on real estate, the pillars of it are the four pillars of Southern California. I can't remember, but real estate's one of them. And everybody's houses after World War II went up and up and up and up. And the real estate taxes were how we paid for the good schools. And the taxes were going up and up and up. And it reached a point where really wonderful lower middle class people had seen the value of their houses go so high that they were having to move to Idaho because they couldn't pay the taxes on their houses. So they bitched and moaned and moaned and groaned. Ronald Reagan came in as governor. He had a good ear and heard them, and he changed the tax system in a way that saved those people and their houses. Unfortunately, he did so at the cost of California's public schools. I'm not sure, no, I'm sure that was not the intent of doing that. But sometimes you do one thing and it causes another. And we'll get back to that later in talking about the lake.
Bob, you made another mistake, just as Michael did, sending me an email, which went on to say, I, Bob Hopper, on behalf of the Chautauqua Science Group, volunteered, I believe, to lead a session in the series on Tuesday, April 30th at 6:30. For the session, I propose to focus on how the scientific method can help concerned Chautauquans and lake stakeholders concentrate on asking helpful questions, such as based on relevant hypotheses, and then rationally assess data and answers developed while avoiding ad hominem arguments. Wow. So that's what you propose to do today. Are you actually going to do all that?
You just did it, reading my email. Actually, yes, I am going to do that, and I'm going to do it in oblique, roundabout ways. But last summer, at the end of the season, I was afraid that the debate and the plans for how to fix the lake was going to become the amphitheater Mark II. You laugh, I didn't. And I thought we were going to have bitter arguments within the community, and even more, I thought we were going to have heated, almost hateful arguments between the Chautauqua institution and the players outside of the gates. And I'm a newcomer at Chautauqua. My wife Carol and I, we've only been here since 2002. And we really remember getting here as total newbies and trying to figure out, what is this place? How do you influence things? What's going on? And now we have been here long enough that we can sort of answer those questions. And you organize and you do things. But I have been so pleased to watch the YouTube videos that Greg has put online and to see that since October and then in the winter, as these things have rolled on, that you all have been exposed to some really good science. I have too, watching them on TV. And it has been so civilized. And I am now confident that, I'm not confident we're going to fix the lake, but I am confident that as we deal with the issues, we're going to be humane and intelligent with one another. And I want to thank everyone who's been working so hard on this. I mean, some of us have lost faith in government. Your county government has done an incredible job. George Borrello, in negotiating and organizing things, it looks wonderful to me. The reaching out and working with the Lake George people, really smart. Working towards a consensus agreement was a really sensible way to do it. And the thing I appreciated a lot was that everybody, every part of the alphabet soup that are organizations who care about the lake, all came out and said the key is to use good science. And that gives me some comfort. But science is not a religion, science is not an ideology, science is a method where you test things and you disprove things, and you're never at the end. And so we'll use science and we'll try things. Some things will fail and some things will succeed. But hopefully we'll always have water in the lake, always be able to enjoy it. And I would say last week I was watching George Bouillon from Toledo, and I really appreciated that he's going to be bringing interns and doing practical studies of the water in the lake and the algae blooms. And I was really grateful to Doug for asking at the end, for Greg. Are you Doug or Greg? For asking at the end of my friend Doug Neckers, are you going to make this information public? And made sure that the answers we get from monitoring and doing this will be out there for us all to look. And that's how science works best, when the information isn't closeted up but is put out there.
You're representing the Chautauqua Science Group, an organization which was incorporated in 2012 to promote the understanding, awareness, and use of science in society by planning and presenting to the public lectures and scientific demonstrations on topics in the physical, chemical, and life sciences and the role of ethics in science. And you also passed out some items, thank you very much. Could you kind of tie in that general statement as to what your goal is and how this may apply to the lake?
Thank you. The first thing I handed out was the lake. And one of the things I'm sure for all of you, even the people who were born in Clymer, when you come here, you wonder, why is this place called Chautauqua? What is Chautauqua? And I remember going to one of John Schmidt's talks on the different possible meanings of Chautauqua. And one that he loves and debunks very well is that Chautauqua is a bag tied in the middle. But Chautauqua is a bag tied in the middle. There's no doubt about it. You look at it, and you know why it's a bag tied in the middle? Because it's really two lakes. You had two different ice jams coming through at different times, carving out the lake, filling them, unfilling them, in a way that these are essentially two lakes tied in the middle at Bemis Point. And I think when we're studying and thinking about how to live well on the lake, sometimes it's important to remember that it's a southern lake and a northern lake. It's a shallow lake and a deep lake. It's a lake that runs from north to south and goes out to Chautauqua at Jamestown. And those factors all affect what we can do and how we live on the lake. So I love maps. This map is courtesy of the new Chautauqua Harbor Hotel. If you're there and you walk around, they'll give you a free tour still, I think. If you go by their recreation room, they have done a huge mural with this map, and it's so impressive. It's worth a cup of coffee. Go see it. Okay, that's one thing I handed out. The other thing was the little thing that's called the General Scientific Method. And if you look, it has two sides, and one is a bunch of nice words on how science is supposed to work, and the other is a little cartoony chart of how the scientific method works. And this was written for a junior high school textbook in the 1950s. It has really simple language, and it's pretty darn true. The only thing that's a little iffy about it is it talks about the search for truth in science. And in many ways, that's the last thing science can prove to you is what's true. The scientific method lets you have a hypothesis, test something, and it works best when you prove something isn't true, and you move on and you try something else. But we found what happened and why the Chautauqua Science Group got started was there were a lot of scientists on the grounds who were, over time, disappointed that the educational pillar of the Chautauqua institution consistently downplayed science. And these people, who were really a bunch of great guys and a few great women, wanted to get science more on the agenda at Chautauqua. They had tried and tried and tried, and they were frustrated. And they discovered that I had a background as a lying, scheming diplomat. And they thought maybe, rather than have scientists speak for us, we should get a diplomat to speak for us. Now, my wife can tell you that as a diplomat, I'm not always diplomatic. And so I was hustled into becoming the president of this group. And we needed to become incorporated. And I went to Greg's law firm, and he assigned a person to work with us and got us our New York State nonprofit status. And we immediately realized there were so many things we could do here to help get science on the agenda. And our group started doing talks every week. And so that's how we've tried to do this, Greg.
With regards specifically to Chautauqua Lake, has your group gathered, have they mused about the various stakeholders? There's been various position papers by the 9 people who have preceded you. Did you actually take that subject on?
Yes, and one of our leaders is a pioneering epidemiologist who had, as a young man, was one of the paper pushers doing the grunt work on the cancer tobacco study, and saw that it's hard to know what causes what toxins cause what. And he got worried last year learning about the use of herbicides, that one of them was a toxin he had worked on before. One of them contained a toxin he had worked with before. And so he's going to do a talk this coming season on toxins. We have another fellow who happens to live in the Naples, Sarasota part of Florida in the winter, and is a biologist. And where he lives, he's had his life disrupted by red tide. And he's become concerned, well, can Chautauqua Lake get impacted as badly by the things that we have? So we have a number of issues that have come up. And we've been thrilled that science has worked, that John Shedd has been doing work to get science involved in all of these programs. So we do take it very seriously.
Did you, as things progressed even last year, and there's a lot of, I don't say acrimony, but conversation, did your science group ever issue kind of an opinion, a position paper, an email, or something that was kind of formalized? Do you do that?
No. And the reason we didn't do it is because you need information to do things. So actually is John Shedd here? Is John Shedd's boss here? Well, we went to John at the end of the season, and he'd given a talk, and he had been working with some experts in Atlanta, and he had some data on the lake. And we asked, could we have that data so that we could have our experts study it? And it turned out that there were legal issues involved in the study. We know we'll get it eventually, but we would like to see more information so that we could help. We have experts, we can help on this, and we would do it for free. But we've been really pleased that over the winter, lots of good information has come out, and we're very happy. And we hope that there'll be some talks this summer where we'll have an explanation of just what is the Lake George model. Just how do we flesh out the Chautauqua mediation consensus plan? And our group is happy to help on that.
You are actually speaking this summer with somebody named Allison Hopper at a project, right?
Yes.
So what's that subject?
What we're going to be talking about is the scientific method, but something called big science and big history. We met with last year's wonderful Vice President of Education, David Griffith, who was encouraging us to come up with some programs that would work with the club and with Club Plus. And so we're trying to put together some science classes that will eventually encourage teens and college-age kids to start taking more special studies classes and be active. But we're going to experiment year one, and we're going to do it as a more adult-focused class on how it's essentially all of the data that have been collected with modern technology to put some more meat on the bones of evolution. And that's our class will be looking at the collection of lots of data and how it proves what the history of the universe is.
Your I think you're making kind of an offer here today, Bob, on behalf of the Chautauqua Science Group to be a resource for data that may be coming from the George Bullard Johns, which we talked about last week, or potential sensors that may come from the Jefferson Project and other data. And that inevitably you get data and then you got to analyze it and then figure out what it means, which then leads to some sort of implemented policy. Am I hearing that correctly?
Sure, why not? I want to say before, another person I want to thank is Tom Becker. Because in Tom's series of 3 taps while we were here, one of the things he would usually say was, okay, you've been here for 9 weeks, you've been energized, you've learned interesting things, now I want you to take them home and be a spark in your community. I always thought that was important, valuable advice. But the more I thought about it, I realized that it's a two-way street. And we also go home and we learn things in the winter, and we get energized in different ways in the winter. And we come back here. And maybe a little better and more use can be made of the energy and expertise that people bring back to Chautauqua and the things they know about, the people they could recommend even for such holy things as being speakers in the AMP. And there are brilliant people roaming around having coffee in the kiosk who are great assets, and we're trying to use them too, and they are us. So I don't know if that.
Well, I can envision the Chautauqua Science Group in one of its programs sort of inviting the community. If you have thoughts about Chautauqua Lake, come visit us at such and such a hall. I mean, that's a convening opportunity, I would think, for your group to gather or at least solicit people who you don't know. I mean,
Right.
Chautauqua's loaded with, as you say. How do you get them to one place at one time?
We do our meetings in the Hall of Christ, which can seat, it used to be able to seat about 320 people, and then the fire marshals went to town, and it can only seat about 250 people. And so, given an issue as big as the lake, we may be too small a group, but we want to work with the institution as a whole to help organize some bigger venues. Oh, sometimes little series of small things can work even better. But our goal is to help promote some bigger dialogue in a positive way on how to deal with the lake.
Bob, you have a chair, and on that chair are your notes, and I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to share whatever you may have that I have not asked you about.
Thank you.
Yes.
This book is book number 1 this coming season for the CLSC reading program. Whoever selected this was brilliant.
What is the book?
The book is The Life and Death of the Great Lakes.
The death and the life.
Death and life.
Yes, I can't read. You can read, that's up here. I can't,
No, I read
I can't
it.
see
It's
it.
the
I read the book.
We've got a lot of books that
Yeah.
are read.
And what this book taught me is that humans are so clever. We see a problem in front of us. We figure out a way to solve that problem, and it causes another one. And actually, since the game of life, you could say, is solving problems, it's a brilliant skill that we have, that we can keep creating new problems for us. So he's coming. Read, if you can even skim. You can read a few chapters. Look at it, go to his talk.
Give a little short synopsis of it, Bob, for those who are here. Give a little plug for the book, other than read it.
All right. The most important thing is when the Erie Canal was built, and we connected the Hudson River and the Atlantic to Lake Erie. Then in the 50s, when the great program to do the St. Lawrence Seaway and reconnect even more of the Atlantic to Lake Ontario and into the Great Lakes, that while that encouraged commerce and business and tourism, it also brought invasive species and changes to the lake. The zebra mussels coat the bottom of the lakes and cause problems. There were I'm from San Pedro, California. Our fish are sardines and tuna. But there was something here called alewife. And they brought in, the alewife were eating too much of the floaties in the lake and causing an imbalance. So they brought in another fish to take care of the alewife. Ate all of them. Changed things, caused problems. So they bring in another. They bring in some big salmon to, they didn't think it would work. They come in. They solve that problem and create a tourism boom because they're a great sport fish. Causes so just one entertaining human problem after another. But he ends up, he's not totally pessimistic.
Yes.
So I like life stories that aren't totally pessimistic. I'm an optimist, so that's it. The next book I want to show, this is from the CLSC in the 1880s. It's a textbook on physics. This place, under Reverend Vincent, was a modern place that believed in science and taught science, and we forget that. Last week, my friend Doug blasted the history and blasted Vincent a little bit for putting crap in the lake. Literally putting your crap in the lake. The reason Bishop Vincent did that was because he was deathly afraid that the Chautauqua Assembly was going to die if it got dysentery or cholera. So he came up with one of the first, it was a sewage system, but it involved taking the stuff and dumping it down at that end of the lake. He also was afraid of fire. So he didn't let people have barbecues inside their houses and fire. And there were public places to eat, partly because Lewis Miller believed in dining at the communal table. But even more than that, they were afraid that we were going to burn the place down. And so they always used the most modern technology they could find to help us grow and keep us safe. And one of the things, I'm a historian really, and one of the things I love about history is you discover everybody at every time of human life, when they were alive, they were the smartest, most modern people who ever existed. So sometimes we tend to look back on people in the 1880s and say, oh my God, these Victorians, they were smart, modern people. And someday people are going to look back at us and see the god-awful stupid things we're doing and the wonderful smart things we're doing. And we're going to be embarrassed. But it's okay. We're trying. The next thing,
No.
there is a book. This is one of my favorite books that I've ever read in my whole life. And it's by a fellow who had spoken at Chautauqua, Eugene Linden. And it's called The Future in Plain Sight. And what the lesson it teaches is that since the Enlightenment, the world, and especially the white Western European world, has been living in a time of incredible stability. The weather's been good overall. We've figured out how to feed ourselves unless you were Irish and eating potatoes. But we've had a period that's allowed education and prosperity, and there are some risks that climate change, technology, social media, many things that are happening right now put at risk the stability that we've all, even if we don't appreciate it, that we've prospered under. So this is a good book. So those are why I brought these things. Then the final big dream that the science group had, we wanted to create an Edison House of Science here. We wanted to build a building next to the Everett Jewish Life Center that would be about the same size, but that would have rooms in it where we could do scientific demonstrations. It would have rooms where postdocs and a couple of professors, some from St. Bonaventure, could come and be here during the 12 weeks of the extended season. And they could teach in the club. They could do demonstrations. They could make science come alive. And that was one of the reasons I volunteered to do all of this. And then I found out it was going to take about $5 to $10 million to do it, and nobody stepped up and wrote me a check. So it's still a dream, and I think it's something that Chautauqua should do. And it's something if I get enough time and somebody helps me raise some money, I'd still like to do. And I think Thomas Edison would be happy if we did it. And, you know, the other thing, Doug also mentioned that the Edison grandchildren had written a letter to the New York Times. What he didn't quite say is they wrote a letter saying how shocked their grandfather would be at the people who say there's no global climate change, who can't figure out that the temperature's higher and that things are happening, and that it's a shame we don't have a tinkering Thomas Edison right now. And yet I'm sure we do have hundreds of Thomas Edisons running around, and we just need to bring them here. One other, I'd like to apologize. How many of you really live outside the golden gates of Chautauqua and don't come here all the time, even are somewhat suspicious of those of us who come up here? I want to say every once in a while, when I accidentally say Chautauqua does this and Chautauqua does that, if it's good, I mean the whole county, and if it's bad, I mean the institution, but or vice versa. And
So, Bob, you got the final word. We're gonna draw closure now in 1 minute. You've got the final thing.
science is not a religion. Science is a method. I'm not even sure religion is a religion, but just try, read, keep an open mind, try things, experiment, and let's see what happens. And help me, say hello when we're walking along on the grounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob Hopper.